Most great Christian writers of history came from pulpits, universities, or noble families. John Bunyan, however, came from a tinker's forge. He was born in November of 1628, in the small village of Elstow, just outside Bedford, England, a place that would shape his early life. His father mended pots and kettles for a living, humble, dirty, honest work, and as soon as Bunyan was old enough, he learned the same trade. There would be no Oxford education for this boy, no Latin tutors, no theological libraries. What little schooling he received was brief and basic. By every measure that 17th-century England used to judge a man's prospects, John Bunyan was destined to live and die in obscurity, fixing pots in a forgotten corner of rural England. History, however, had other plans. The boy from Elstow would go on to write a book that, after the Bible itself, became one of the most widely read works in the entire English language, translated into hundreds of languages, carried by missionaries to the far corners of the earth, and read by kings and peasants alike. But before any of that, there was a soldier, a sinner, and a man tormented nearly to despair by his own conscience. As a teenager, Bunyan was swept into the same conflict that was reshaping all of England, the civil war between the king and parliament. He served for a time in the parliamentary army, stationed at a garrison not far from home. He saw little of the war's great battles, but he came close enough to death that the memory stayed with him, a constant reminder of his own mortality. By his own later account, he was once due to stand guard at a siege, but another soldier took his place instead, and that soldier was killed by a single shot to the head. Bunyan never forgot it, the memory of what could have been, a fate that was barely avoided. A few inches of fate, a moment's swap of duty, and his story would have ended in an unmarked grave instead of beginning at all. He walked away from his army years with his life intact, and his conscience badly unsettled, the first hint of a question that would haunt him for the next decade: why had he been spared, and for what? It was, truly, a question that would change the course of his life. If you read Bunyan's own account of his early adulthood, a remarkable little book called Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners, you do not meet a calm man slowly coming to faith, you meet a man at war with himself. By his own description, his sins as a young man were nothing extraordinary: cursing, occasional gambling, the ordinary roughness of a village tradesman. But his sense of guilt over them became, truly, extraordinary. He described being gripped by terror that he had committed some unforgivable sin, that he was already condemned, that even his own thoughts were evidence against him. He would lie awake, certain that Christ himself had turned away from him forever. Scripture verses he had only half noticed before would suddenly explode in his mind like accusations, and other verses, just as suddenly, would offer the faintest flicker of hope, only for despair to come crashing back an hour later. It went on like this for years, not days, but years. A grown man, a husband, a working tradesman, privately convinced he might be beyond the reach of grace, and unable to tell whether the conviction was the voice of truth or the voice of a tormented mind. Few writers in church history have ever described the inside of spiritual anguish as honestly, or as relentlessly, as the young John Bunyan. Two things broke through that darkness. The first was his marriage. Bunyan's first wife came from a poor family, so poor that she brought no dowry into the marriage at all, except for 2 books that had belonged to her own father, The Plain Man's Pathway to Heaven, and The Practice of Piety. They were ordinary devotional books, nothing remarkable in themselves, but they would, nonetheless, have a profound impact on Bunyan's life. But Bunyan, hungry and unsettled, read them together with his young wife, and for the first time began to think seriously about what real faith might actually look like. It was, truly, a pivotal moment. The second moment came almost by accident, on an ordinary day in the town of Bedford, a day that would, in hindsight, prove to be quite extraordinary. Bunyan, going about his trade, passed by a group of poor women sitting in a doorway, talking quietly among themselves, about the new birth, about the work of God in the soul, about a kind of joy that didn't depend on circumstances, and he found it, truly, captivated. He had never heard people speak about faith that way before, not as religious duty, but as something they had actually experienced, something alive in them. He found himself unable to walk away, so he came back, again and again, just to listen. Those women belonged to a small nonconformist congregation in Bedford, led by a former royalist officer turned pastor named John Gifford, a man who, by all accounts, was deeply devoted to his faith. Through them, and through Gifford's own ministry, the years of private torment slowly, painfully, began to give way to something Bunyan had never expected to find, peace. Bunyan joined Gifford's congregation and was eventually baptized, a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. And then something happened that surprised everyone, including, by his own account, Bunyan himself. He began to preach. He had no university training, no formal theological degree, no ordination in any recognized church, but what he had was an unusually vivid way with words, forged not in a classroom but in years of wrestling his own soul to the ground, and a way of talking about sin, guilt, and grace that ordinary working people instantly recognized as true, because he was describing exactly what they themselves had felt and never had words for. Crowds began to gather wherever he spoke, farmers, tradesmen, servants, people who had never been moved by the polished sermons of educated clergy found themselves gripped by this self-taught tinker who spoke their own language and seemed to know their own hearts. Bunyan's reputation grew well beyond Bedford, and that growing reputation would soon put him in very serious danger. In 1660, the monarchy was restored, and Charles II took the throne, an event that would change the course of Bunyan's life forever. The religious freedom that nonconformist preachers like Bunyan had enjoyed during the Commonwealth years vanished almost overnight. New laws made it illegal to preach outside the official church, a development that would, inevitably, lead to trouble for Bunyan. And it is, truly, almost impossible to overstate what happened next. The book opens with a simple, yet powerful, device. The narrator falls asleep and dreams, remembering, perhaps, the turmoil of his own life. In the dream, a man named Christian, burdened by a great weight on his back, flees the city of destruction in search of salvation. Along the road, he meets Evangelist, who points the way, Mr. Worldly Wiseman, who tries to talk him out of the journey entirely, and a host of unforgettable characters and places that have become part of the English language itself. The Slough of Despond, a swamp of despair that nearly swallows him, Vanity Fair, a town built entirely on worldly distraction and pleasure, Doubting Castle, where Christian is imprisoned by giant despair until he remembers a key called Promise was in his pocket the whole time, and at last, after every trial, the celestial city itself. It was not subtle theology dressed up in costume, it was, rather, Bunyan's own 12 years of guilt, doubt, despair, and hard-won peace, turned into a story so vivid that a barely literate farmhand and a university scholar could both read it and feel it was written for them personally. Within Bunyan's own lifetime, it went through edition after edition, a testament to its enduring power. In the centuries since, it has never gone out of print, a remarkable feat, considering the countless books that have been written and forgotten. It has been translated into more languages than almost any other book in human history, apart from Scripture itself, carried by missionaries into territories where Bunyan's name was never heard, but his pilgrim's journey somehow always made sense. A tinker with no formal education had written one of the most influential works of literature the world has ever produced, and he had written most of it from inside a prison cell. When Bunyan was finally released, he did not retire quietly. He was, by all accounts, a man on a mission. He returned to Bedford and became the pastor of the very congregation that had once gathered to hear those poor women talk about the new birth, the same congregation where his own journey toward peace had begun, and where it would, ultimately, come full circle. He kept writing for the rest of his life, and, in doing so, created a body of work that would stand the test of time. The life and death of Mr. Badman painted, in equally vivid terms, the opposite journey, a portrait of a man who walks confidently toward ruin. The Holy War cast the human soul as a besieged city, fought over by the forces of good and evil. None of these later works ever matched the towering reach of the Pilgrim's Progress, but together they confirmed that Bunyan's gift had never been a single lucky accident, it was simply how his mind worked, truth, made visible through story, and, truly, a remarkable thing. In August of 1688, already in his 60th year, Bunyan undertook one final act of pastoral care. He rode through heavy rain to help reconcile a father and his estranged son, a quiet, ordinary act of ministry, the kind he had performed countless times, with no audience and no recognition expected. The ride soaked him through, and not long after, he fell seriously ill with a fever. He died on the 31st of August, 1688, at the London home of a friend, far from the Bedford congregation he had shepherded for so many years. He was buried in Bunhill Fields, the same nonconformist burial ground in London where so many dissenting voices of his century would eventually come to rest, a tinker laid in the same quiet ground as some of the boldest believers England had produced. John Bunyan never set foot in a university, and yet, he was a man of great wisdom. He never held an official church office recognized by the state, but he was, nonetheless, a leader among his people. He spent 12 years of his life locked behind bars for the simple crime of refusing to stop telling people about grace, a testament to his unwavering commitment to his faith. And yet, his dream of a burdened pilgrim, fleeing destruction and pressing on toward a distant, shining city, has outlived every empire, every law, and every magistrate that ever tried to silence him. It has comforted the dying, strengthened missionaries in foreign lands, and given generations of ordinary believers, people every bit as unschooled and unremarkable as Bunyan himself once was, a map for their own spiritual journey, and, truly, a gift that will continue to inspire for years to come. Maybe you've never stood in a prison cell, but maybe you know what it feels like to carry a weight on your back that nobody else can see. Maybe you've had your own slough of despond, a season where faith felt like sinking instead of walking. Maybe you've sat, like Bunyan once did, convinced that grace was for everyone except you, remembering the darkness, the doubt, and the fear that seemed to suffocate you. Here is what his whole life testifies to: the road out of despair is real, and it has a destination. The same God who met a tormented young tinker in a Bedford doorway is still meeting people in their lowest moments today, and that is a truth that can bring hope to even the most desperate of situations. The promise was in Christian's pocket the entire time he was locked in that castle, and grace has been within reach of you the entire time too, even in the seasons when you couldn't feel it, when it seemed lost or distant. So, if you're walking this road right now, tired, uncertain, wondering if you'll ever reach the city on the hill, take one more step. Open the Word, and let its words bring comfort to your soul. Say one honest prayer, even if it's just a few broken words, and mean them, truly, with all your heart. Keep walking, because the Pilgrim's Road has carried far weaker people than you home before, and it can do the same for you. If this story stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, someone who is struggling, and needs a reminder of God's love and grace. And if you want more stories like this one, lives of faith, courage, and grace that have shaped the church for centuries, subscribe to this channel, so you never miss what's coming next, and discover the inspiring stories of pilgrims who have gone before us. There are more pilgrim stories still to tell, and each one is a testament to the power of faith, and the promise of a destination that is, truly, worth walking towards.